There are a couple of times that my assistant put in for a breakfast when I was on a plane, and they say I should have not claimed because I should have eaten that breakfast. Well, those breakfasts are pretty awful. If you want ice cold camembert with broken crackers, have it.
Well, I guess the camembert story really is just too good to ignore, so let's deal with it first. Andrew's in Toronto, Bruce is in New York, and the Huffington Post's Ottawa Bureau Chief Althea Raj is taking the temperature of things on Parliament Hill. We're going to start with you, Althea, but I guess, first of all, you know, some quotes live forever. You know, David Dingwall's entitled to his entitlements, and Bev Oda's $16 orange juice, and Senator Nancy Ruth now will live in infamy as well with this one. Aside from that, what's important about this camembert story?
Well, I just want to say I actually appreciate that Senator Ruth spoke frankly, but I do think it speaks to a lot of problems that Canadians have about the upper chamber, which is it speaks to entitlements, it speaks to excess, it speaks to elitism of some sort. And she just represented all of that with the ice-cold camembert and broken crackers. And just the very Marie Antoinette-esque way of saying it, you know, you can't make this stuff up.
Andrew.
She said publicly and with a certain twist what other senators have been saying in droves privately to reporters, any reporter they can buttonhole over the last several weeks. And it looks almost orchestrated in an attempt to say, you know, this Auditor General is such a nitpicker. He's going after every little thing, and trying to sort of frame the whole debate as if when the report comes out, it's not a tale of extravagance and waste amongst a large number of senators, but actually just a sign that the Auditor General doesn't understand what senators do. You've seen a lot of that kind of spin coming out. I suspect that is not going to work. I think we saw a foretaste of that this week. I think we're going to see that in fact, many of the senators will have some explaining to do. And when you think, of course, that these were the people who sat in judgment of Mike Duffy and Pamela Wallin, it's going to make it doubly hard for them.
Bruce?
Well, it was a terrible quote at a horrible time in the life of this institution, Peter. I guess I look at it and say there probably is some argument to be made, and some senators trying to make it, that maybe the Auditor General is going through things with a little bit too fine a comb. But I think that this quote at this moment probably sunk any chances of that being an effective strategy. And that really speaks to the fact that there can't be a strategy on the part of the senators. They're all a group of individuals. There's no leader, there's no strategy, there's no message. And I think inevitably it was a good day for the NDP in their position on abolition, and a bad day for anybody who thinks that they're going to have to campaign to keep some form of the Senate going forward. Well,
the Senate story, of course, will take on a whole different tone again next week when the Duffy trial begins in Ottawa. Budget day announced finally now. April 21st is the budget. Joe Oliver, the finance minister, announcing that today. And one wonders, with that, the opposition, I know, have been asking questions about the economy, haven't been getting much traction out of it, while terror has been the big billing for the past few months. Assuming that the budget now on the part of all parties moves the economy front and center as an issue, who benefits most from that, given the kind of economic situation that we have right now? Andrew?
Short term, I think certainly the government. Longer term is up in the air. But short term, they get to focus on their budget, which presumably they will make all the ducks line up so that they're able to both deliver a balanced budget and deliver some of these goodies that they've been promising in the months and weeks past. Whether the numbers are credible or not, that'll be examined on the day. But they'll have, I think, some good news stories to tell on the day. And of course, it will also allow them to move on, one assumes, or their hope will be, from the Mike Duffy story. And I think that's probably the biggest reason why the budget's been delayed so long, was to give them some breathing room from that. Longer term, it will depend on the state of the economy, and we just don't know at this point. To be a negative for an incumbent government, though, you pretty much have to be in a recession. Good times, people tend to stick with the government of the day. Uncertain times, it will really depend upon who they perceive as being more competent, and I think at this stage I would still say that's not a plus for Justin Trudeau.
All right, Althea, what do you make of it? I'm of two minds on this. On the one hand, I actually think the government can argue both ways. If, you know, the economy looks like things are going better, it's great, Stephen Harper can take credit. In the meantime, they can still say the 2011 line that we even heard today from the finance minister is that, you know, the economy, we're in fragile times, stick with, you know, the government, you can't trust the others, precisely what Andrew said. But I really think that this is an opportunity for the Liberals, and they've really failed to capitalize on it. They actually have a pretty strong economic record, and yet they have not countered any of the claims that we hear repeatedly in question period. Pierre Poilievre, the Prime Minister, stand up and they say that the Liberals are, they have a record of killing jobs, of growing deficits, of not paying down the debt, which is actually the opposite. And instead of saying their positive story, they've been silent. And because they haven't actually put forward that much in the window, the Conservatives have been able to, accuse the Liberals of wanting to raise taxes, and the Liberals not saying anything in their defense.
Bruce?
Well, right now, I think the economy is not strong enough to really be helping the Conservatives, and it's not weak enough to be helping the opposition parties. I do think the Conservatives are going to have to decide whether they're campaigning on the idea that they've created a strong economy and should be effectively rewarded for that, or that the economy is in peril and that nobody else can be trusted to manage it going forward. I don't think they're going to be able to have it both ways. I believe, though, that the budget is going to include some things that are going to please people, and of course the government's going to spend, I think, $7.5 million of our taxpayer dollars to advertise its merits to us in that period running up to an election, which should be a cause, I think, for some voters to be concerned.
I want to throw a quote up on the screen. Sometimes you can look outside the country to get a better sense, or get a different kind of sense of what's seen in terms of our economic picture. And this is an interesting one, because after years of being told from the outside that Canada has one of the leading economies in the world, you get this week on the PBS NewsHour from the economist Vikram Ramani, who teaches at both Yale and Harvard, author of the Boom-Bustology, Spotting Financial Bubbles Before They Burst. This has been passed around a lot this week. This is what he says. I was recently in Canada and noticed a schizophrenic oscillation, love that, between housing exuberance and oil price despair. What did it mean for the Canadian economy's outlook? Upon returning to the U.S., I did some research. What I found leads me to the conclusion that Canada is now among the most vulnerable large economies in the world. What do we make of that? Andrew?
I'm not entirely sure how thoroughly he researched the question of Canada. I don't actually think that's true. I think people talk about, for example, the household debt and these scary numbers about the percentage of household income that represents. They never mention that household assets have also been growing and are in fact 5 times debt. Net worth is at an all-time high. Housing affordability, the principal plus interests on your mortgage as a percentage of income has never been lower. People have actually been taking on prudent amounts of debt considering how low the interest rates are. The oil price thing has certainly had an impact, but remember, it's differential. It's very bad for Alberta and the oil-producing regions. It's very good, the oil price decline, for Ontario and Quebec. On balance, it's a negative for the economy, but I don't think it warrants those kinds of shock horror headlines.
Anybody talking like this, Althea, around Ottawa?
Not at all. In fact, I think what's kind of laughable when you compare what we're hearing from this man and what we're hearing from, well, actually economists across the country, is that the government seems to think that the income splitting bill and its increased child care benefits are what's going to save us and what's going to somehow spur economic growth, when we've just gotten really bad numbers that the economy is not growing at all and in fact shrinking.
What about you, Bruce? Are you also dismissive of this person's view?
Well, I try not to second-guess economists. There are plenty of people around to do that. But I guess when I look at the mood of Canadians, they are in between. They are not fearful of some great falling off the cliff. They're not exuberant particularly. And they've been that way for some considerable period of time. And I think it's that sense that average Canadians have about the health of the economy that's going to matter a lot more than stories and screaming headlines that predict some doom that hasn't yet arrived.
I want to show you an exchange that took place on the, just actually moments before the vote on Monday night in terms of the move of Canadian forces into Syria as well as Iraq in the fight against ISIS. This was an exchange between Jason Kenney, the defense minister, and the leader of the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, shortly after Justin Trudeau's speech on the motion that was about to be voted on. It started with Jason Kenney, and then Trudeau responded. Watch this.
This is the member who characterized the policy of the Government of Canada in responding positively to a request from the Government of Iraq to coordinate with dozens of other nations in a military action against a genocidal terrorist organization. He characterized that as the Prime Minister wanting to, quote, whip out his CF-18s and show us how big they are. Mr. Speaker, this comes from a leader who is so profoundly unserious on such matters of national security, who ridiculed the equipment of the Royal Canadian Air Force as, quotes, a bunch of aging warplanes.
I find it quite ironic that this is the minister getting up to mention some of my misspeaks, many of whom I have fully acknowledged and owned up to, at the same time as he has refused to apologize for completely mischaracterizing a religious ritual as being ISIS enslavement. He has consistently misled in terms of precision bombing, in terms of misspeaking. He is now referred to as more gaffe-prone than any other MP in this House. And quite frankly, that's not the kind of rigor that we need from a defense minister, and it's certainly not the kind of rigor that, up until now, this minister had a reputation for. He is completely out of his depth in this particular portfolio. And I think we all see it.
All right, here's what I found interesting about that. We'll set aside the facts that both had against the other for a second. Pick up on them if you wish. What I found interesting about it was that was the first time that I've seen Justin Trudeau not reading from a prepared text in the House of Commons in any kind of form, whether it's question period or in debate. That was interesting because we're heading into a period where he's going to have to do a lot of that. Althea, you wrote a book on Justin Trudeau, so you watch him pretty closely. What do you make of that?
Well, actually, my takeaway was all the relieved faces from the Liberal backbench there that just seemed so pleased that finally their leader was getting up and defending himself, because he has not been doing that in the Commons at all. I think he was probably salivating at the chance of going after Jason Kenney, because these two individuals really do not like each other. If you check out Jason Kenney's Twitter feed, you'll see that he practically spends as much time tweeting about multicultural events than he does tweeting about how terrible Justin Trudeau is. So I think that both were itching at the opportunity to insult the other and claim that either is unfit to govern.
Andrew.
It's sort of a sad commentary that this is indeed remarkable that the leader of the party that until now has been leading in the polls is actually able to make a speech without reading from notes. To be fair to him, that's all too prevalent across the Commons with a lot of MPs, and it's nice to see anybody getting up and actually speaking extemporaneously. I think clearly, I think part of it is there was an opening here in that Jason Kenney's had a bad few weeks. He's made some gaffes, he's made some foolish remarks on Twitter and elsewhere, and he's not quite the imposing figure at this moment that he might have been in another time. He's vulnerable at this moment, and in politics, he never missed the opportunity to put the boot in. Bruce?
Well, I think there's no path to any victory for Justin Trudeau that doesn't involve him being tested, and quite intensely. And so he's going through a testing period right now. I think I agree with Althea that the reaction of his supporters was one of relief and enthusiasm. I think that there's probably been some risk on the part of the Liberals that in the aftermath of a few gaffes last year, that they took a very cautious approach with him, putting him in situations where he was unlikely to make a mistake. But he now needs to take some risks and show more authenticity. In that moment that you played the clip of, showed a lot of authenticity, and that's the kind of thing that will give people a sense of whether or not he's the right man for them.
You know, there's one other thing I wonder about. He spent a lot of time in the last year saying he would never be attacking others because he was going to take the high road on everything. In that moment, he went on the attack, and you wonder whether they've made a deliberate decision that it's time he needs to do that. Is there any indication of that, Althea?
Not that I know of, but I'm not aware of a strategy that's decided to get rid of Laurier's sunny ways and start attacking his opponents so strongly. I thought they would leave that to others, and Mr. Trudeau would be taking the high road. I just think the opportunity presented itself, and he could not pass it up.
I've got 15 seconds, Bruce, if you can add to it at all.
I would not be surprised if they made a decision that he's established that he's a pretty nice guy most of the time, but then he needs to snarl a little bit and show that he can fight too.
All right. That's it. That wraps us up for this night. Althea, thanks for joining us with Chantal Away, Andrew here in Toronto, Bruce in New York City tonight.